Unit 2, Lesson 6, Stress, Arousal, and Anxiety. The Unit 2, Lesson 6 vocabulary. After this presentation, we should be able to understand different types of stress, identify the different types of arousal, and identify the different types of anxiety, as well as defining stress, arousal, and anxiety and how they impact athletes and exercisers. Stress, or how people react to stress, can often be summed up to the fight or flight phenomenon. We will either meet the stressful situation head on, fighting it, or we will flee the stressful situation, the flight. What exactly is anxiety? Anxiety focuses on the future, always worried about what might happen. This includes perceiving the future situation as a threat. Anxiety is a normal reaction to stress because a future-oriented mood state associated with preparation for possible upcoming negative events can dramatically impact our state of well-being. Anxiety is an almost universal human experience. It's an evolution of primal survival instincts. Many consider it to be a bad experience, but it can be useful under the right conditions. Anxiety stops you from acting in ways that are likely to compromise your survival, like picking a fight with someone much bigger or driving your car at over 100 miles per hour. It's not so useful nowadays that there are no natural predators lurking around every corner, but our ancestors had anxiety as they were coming up. So what about fear versus anxiety? Well, they're almost interchangeable in the sense that both can trigger the fight or flight response, and the thing sounding the alarm can be either real or perceived. But fear is an alarm response to present or imminent danger that is real or perceived. Anxiety is a future-oriented mood state associated with preparation for possible upcoming negative events. When you fear something that's real and tangible, or that you think is going to happen now. You become anxious or you have anxiety when you think about what might come in the future or further down the line. Anxiety is the normal and adaptive response to anticipated danger or stressors. This kind of makes us prioritize attention on threat appraisal and mobilizes our body's resources to deal with a danger or escape. It's that fight or flight response. And when we think about functional anxiety, we add a third response to that. It's freezing. So we talked about how fight or flight can be helpful in certain situations, like when you're being attacked or a car accident or some type of a natural disaster. You have the ability to either fight back or flee for personal safety. But this functional anxiety is extremely unhelpful when it's inappropriately triggered. The feelings of anxiety when you have to give a speech in class or a presentation in class, or when you're going on a date or a job interview, or when you're put in a stressful sport situation. Some of the features of anxiety, and I mean, they're different for everybody, for you, for me, for everyone. But some of the main features that are mental like processes is the worry and the self-doubt that leads to fear, a feeling of uneasiness, And you don't only have negative thoughts, you have repetitive negative thoughts. It cycles through your brain, all the negativity. You could have difficulty concentrating or confusion. You can go through depersonalization, which is the feeling of being detached from oneself, usually only in extreme cases of anxiety, but it's that feeling where you don't believe that this is even happening. Major freakouts are common with panic attacks and increased heart rates, rapid breathing and hyperventilation, sweating more than usual, having a stomach ache or a headache, muscle tension and aches. You might begin shaking or feeling nauseous and have butterflies. Those physical features are usually easier to spot than the mental features, mental processes. But either way, it gives us an indication that it's time to use one of the psychological skills we've acquired to calm them down. Getting back to that fight or flight response, this slide explains what your body goes through in response to danger and why we actually feel anxious and why we feel our nerves and how we can feel our nerves. Even though this can be a bad experience, we still need it because we need energy. We need to take action. We don't need to digest our food. We need blood flowing to our muscles during competition. And that fight or flight response and the reactions to stress and anxiety can be especially harmful in competitive situations because competition can be seen as a danger. Competitions, after all, produce stress because they are demanding situations. And in order to succeed, we have to be able to meet those demands. And the demands are usually external, not things we place on ourselves, not demands we place on our own actions, but we're demanded by outside forces, a coach, a referee, a teacher, a situation, a boss, or employer. Contrary to popular belief, anxiety actually is tied directly to performance, and it could aid your performance across a multitude of situations, especially in sports. The graphic demonstrates that we need anxiety to perform well. Not enough anxiety, and we're too relaxed, and we have low adrenaline, and our performance decreases. With extreme anxiety, our performance decreases too. So if things are not as stressful or they're way too stressful, the average athlete's performance diminishes. And everyone's curves might be slightly skewed. It might be not as sharp a curve or as high a peak. It might be more spread out. But the general rule is that there is an acceptable level of anxiety for each individual athlete, each individual person that pushes them to perform at their best, where their performance is excellent. Anything less than that or anything more than that, and it diminishes, it goes down. Arousal, awareness, and regulation. You'll note that this graphic is near identical to the graphic depicting the relationship between anxiety and performance. So there is a direct correlation between the arousal level and performance. Where if you have low arousal in an athletic situation or some type of a competition, you're not likely to perform to the best of your abilities. And if you have too high of an arousal, you're too excited, you're too geeked out, you're too ready, you can actually perform much lower than your expectations. It's that middle level of arousal. You're excited, but not too excited. You're pumped up, but not too pumped up. You're ready to go. You're right in that optimal heart rate zone, optimal preparation zone, optimal fitness zone to get the best out of your performance. It's critically important to remember that each of us are unique, um, and that we're like everybody else, that we're unique because we're not like anybody else. So I hope that makes sense. The graphic you see here is charting the moderate emotional arousal, low emotional arousal, or high emotional arousal of two different people. The curve on the left is for a low skilled, more introverted person with high trait anxiety. And we can see that they reach their optimal level of performance somewhere between low and moderate emotional arousal. And then for the chart on the right, we see that a highly skilled, predominantly extroverted person with low trait anxiety needs a higher level of emotional arousal to reach the same level of performance. Okay, each athlete is reaching the same level of peak performance. They just do it with different motivational factors behind them because of their anxiety levels. What about the optimal arousal level for you? Before we learn the skills, you must identify your optimal arousal. So think back to one of your great performances. Take a few minutes and kind of recreate the whole performance. Focused on how relaxed or excited, how energized or mellow you were. What do you think your activation level was? And how did you feel physically? How did you feel mentally leading up to that event? And now that we have that, think back to your most recent poor performance. What do you remember about that experience? Were you energized to the point of being so hyper that you couldn't stay focused? Were you constantly getting distracted? Or were you too relaxed, seemingly without the energy or strength to get through the event? What was it like? What did your body feel like? What was going on inside your mind? How are you talking to yourself pre and post competition?